Hello, and welcome back to the Thought Cloud podcast. Our goal with this conversation is to uncover a hidden gem that can inspire others along their academic journey. Our guest today is Abby Carr. Abby is going to be an undergraduate sophomore at Harvard, where she studies government with an emphasis on public policy, history, and philosophy. So I'm excited to dig into that and see what she's been able to learn. She is currently an elected member of the student government at Harvard, a member of various organizations within the Institute of Politics, a research member of the criminal justice division of an undergraduate think tank called the Policy Program. And on top of that, she is a member of Harvard Women's Swim and Dive, where she was named 2022 Ivy champion in the 200 butterfly. That is a huge accomplishment. I come from a family of swimmers. So not to mention, she also competed in the 2021 Olympic trial. So Abby, you have a lot to share with so many people. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I honestly couldn't have asked for a better freshman year. It was a ton of fun. Ending with a championship ring with my team, having that Ivy title, being elected to student government, and then a co-chair of another program. I mean, it's more than I ever could have possibly imagined for my very first year of college. So
that is unbelievable. Well, congratulations on finishing that first year.
Thank
What
you.
did you expect going into it? What were your thoughts before coming into Harvard?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think it was different from what I expected, in the sense that this is probably not what you're expecting to hear, but people are so concerned about seeming smart that they forget to just listen and ask questions. So much is lost in an educational space when people are like just pontificating and acting like they know things instead of just asking valuable questions.
Yeah.
I honestly, at so many times, felt like so much time was wasted in lectures because people just wanted to hear themselves talk.
Oh my goodness.
That's more of an observation than a critique. I'm sure I've done that at points in time, but
yeah, we've all done it at points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like probably more of an inevitable side effect of the competitive environment, but I definitely didn't expect that. So
Interesting. So going into it, what did you feel like you were going to see? What were your expectations other than what you just observed?
Yeah, I definitely grappled with a severe imposter syndrome, like every other student at Harvard. But no, absolutely everyone, they're lying if they say they don't have imposter syndrome, I promise you. But I think mine stemmed from the fact that I was an athlete. I thought my team wouldn't value me if I wasn't putting up best times and winning events. That was wrong. And I thought that my classmates would view me as inferior if I revealed that I was an athlete, and that was also wrong. But overcoming that and gaining the confidence to run for student government on the premise that I was an athlete definitely, I think, shows just how big of a jump this year was for me.
Wow.
So,
No, that's unbelievable. How did you cope with those sort of things as you were going through them?
yeah, well, I'm not going to sit here and act like it was a walk in the park. I had a very rough freshman fall. I think I was putting myself under immense pressure to perform, and I fell prey to the classic freshman, like, just I have to join everything, I have to do everything. And as a result, I found myself in 5 different IOP programs, a Christian Impact, a member of a journalism program, and an athlete. And as you might imagine, that didn't work out so well for me. Around mid-November, my coaches made the choice to not take me on a travel meet, and that was my wake-up call. I think, when I realized that my exhaustion and emotional state was actually a detriment to my team's performance, that's when I realized I needed to turn things around. And I evaluated my time commitments. I thought about what was really worth it, and I went from there. I was like, here is what I can manageably do with swimming. Here's what I'm actually passionate about. Here's what I'm just doing to put on my resume. And I went from there.
Very nice. And let's touch back on that part. So you were on travel meet and the coach decided, hey, you got to stay back. Was that because
that's a hard conversation?
Yeah, that is a hard conversation. How did that unfold?
Well, they it was no secret I wasn't doing well. Anyone who knows me knows I wear my emotions on my sleeve. And I think they pulled me to the office and they were like, Abby, look, like, we know we can take you to this meet and you will score, but your mental health is so much more important. And your role on this team is more valuable than the points you earn for us. So we want you to stay back. Please rest. You're clearly not sleeping. Please sleep.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, they were like, think about where you're putting your time. And I mean, my coaches are fantastic. Steph and Amanda are amazing. They've been doing this for years. I think this was not a new situation for them. And as a result, I was able to just, drop a few programs, which was hard for me to do. I'm obviously a huge overachiever. I wanted to do everything. And from there, the semester was considerably easier and I was able to perform well at our championship in Minnesota. So.
That is awesome. Well, I'm glad you're able to have that realization and get yourself in a spot where you're, more able to be yourself instead of
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I owe that to my coaches. I don't want to act like that was a self-initiated endeavor. My team and my coaches are my support system, and they saw what was really going on and jumped in to help. So
have you felt like, that first year on campus, you said it, they're your support system. Who would you fall back onto if it wasn't them? Do they feel like that core unit of, gosh, this is my family?
Yeah, I'd say if not my team, definitely my community at Christian Impact. Having people that shared the same value system, having that foundation for my faith. Also a place where I draw a lot of support, definitely. But the fact of the matter is a lot of my teammates are in Christian Impact.
Really?
So I would have met them anyway. Amazing group of women, honestly. I could go on and on about them. So
goodness. Well, that is so great. What would you say your biggest successes from that first year were? Obviously, you just named a huge one.
Gosh, that's a difficult question, but I'd say self-confidence was, and I know that's not like anything I can write in my LinkedIn or something I can put on my resume, but gaining confidence in myself, and I'll keep coming back to this, but the fact that I went into that student government campaign saying, yes, I'm an athlete. Yes, I'm still in the IOP, which is a very cutthroat program on campus. Yes, I'm doing all this. And I also want to be in like a service role for this student body. That took so much just breaking through comfort zones for me, more than I'll ever be able to put in words or articulate for other people. And I think that is something I would consider my biggest accomplishment.
Wow. So. Oh, wow. And to touch on that a little bit more, it seems like, you said it, IOP is really cutthroat. Obviously, swim and dive is going to take a lot of time out of your schedule, and that's a really important thing to you. Was it the stigma of I'm overcommitted still? Mm-hmm. Was that following with you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I want to preface this statement I'm about to make by saying that no athlete at Harvard is marginalized in any sense. They're not oppressed. I want to make that so explicitly clear. I would actually venture to say that athletes at Harvard are one of the most privileged groups to exist. You get to do the D1 sport you're passionate about with a fantastic team, and you get to experience all of Harvard as a result. Like, in my mind, there's nothing better than that. However, that comes with a unique set of challenges, and really revolving around the fact that people who are leading clubs or extracurriculars are going to assume you don't have a lot of free time, which you don't. I mean, for my sport, we spend about 25 hours a week in practices or lifts. And that doesn't even factor in the amount of time you're emotionally and physically exhausted from said practices. And then the commute back and forth to the athletic center. And then you're up every morning at like 6. So, 25 hours plus extra.
Yeah.
That being said, I think the IOP is unique because it draws a very competitive group of people. The government majors are the people you're going to be seeing running for office one day. You know that the person next to you could be, your next senator. And that comes with a lot of responsibility. People are almost in this competition to do the most, and you have to really find your grounding, find what you're passionate about to stay afloat in there.
Definitely. Wow. Oh, wow. That is, yeah, that is an interesting dynamic. Well, good for you being able to balance it. We're going to dig more into that a little bit later, but I do want to talk about this government major because you have an emphasis on public policy, history, and philosophy. So can you choose from a set of emphases that you want to pursue, or did you put that together yourself? How did this degree get structured?
Yeah, so government is definitely one of the broader concentrations at Harvard. You can really take multiple tracks within it. I'm obviously a rising sophomore, so I haven't even declared yet. That's just what I'm probably going to declare. And at this point, I
Gotcha.
don't think it's going to change. But many people going into their sophomore year, and this is just the beauty of the way they've structured the system, but you don't have to declare yet. It allows a lot of flexibility. Within government, I know there's a data science track that's very popular. There's a more economic oriented track. There's a public policy track. For me, that kind of combination of those three, that's really just what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed philosophy. I've always loved American history, and public policy. I became more interested as I got exposed to it in the IOP. So I was like, yeah, those three are, I like those.
Yeah.
Let's combine
No,
those.
perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, what classes have been your favorite so far that you have taken?
Ooh, yeah, so I took a race in America class. It was fascinating. That was with a Harvard Kennedy School professor.
Did you say race
And
or raised?
race, sorry about that.
Race.
And then
No, no.
and then a data science class, which was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it was kind of unpacking the sociological construction of numbers and how they play different roles in policy. It was really neat. And that was taught by a professor who is far overqualified to be teaching the course.
Give us
So
an
she was
example
just,
of that, what you
yeah.
mean numbers and how they play a role in society or
Yeah,
policy.
so I did a final project on the Navajo Nation COVID cases. And I grew up in Albuquerque for, well, I spent time in Albuquerque. I don't want to present misleading information. I was in between Albuquerque and Maryland because of my parents. And Navajo Nation is north of Albuquerque, and it's one of the biggest reservations in the country. And the COVID crisis there was the worst in the
Hmm.
States. Just because it's close living quarters. It's, I mean, the IHS is notably just not just offers insufficient healthcare. And there's already infrastructural problems within how the federal government serves this group of people. And so I looked at like the COVID numbers and how the CDC reported them, as opposed to how the Urban Indian Health Institute reported them, which is based in Seattle. And I kind of compared like the construction of the numbers. Where did we, what did we leave out? For example, the categorization of the cases when people were filling out the, filling out, oh, this is my race. A lot of the times indigenous wasn't even an option. So all of these numbers were lost. I could go on about that project.
Yeah.
It was fascinating, but it really makes you think about how the numbers in your like New York Times article that pops up every morning on your Instagram, how did that actually come to be? And who
Right.
decided what numbers mattered?
Oh, definitely. That's really interesting because that, I mean, as we're working on data science projects within our company at ThoughtCloud, it's curious to see what the biases could be even for our own results.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's one of the big things I think a lot of projects leave out is understanding those biases. Super cool you're able to do that. So that was your data science class. You said you liked race in America. Were there any other ones that
Yeah.
stood out to you?
Oh, absolutely. My first semester, I took a constitutional law class with a professor who I was fortunate enough to become very close with. And, sometimes the best classes are the ones that really, really push us because I remember calling my dad like the first week of that class, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be terrible.
Oh my God.
And it was, yeah, I actually think, I mean, embarrassing enough, I think I had like a pretty embarrassing mental breakdown like after our first essay because I realized how beyond my comprehension some of the material was. But by the end, I incorporated the professor's feedback. I met with him probably way more than necessary just to hear him hear him talk about the cases and really unpack them slowly for me. And it really sparked my interest in law, actually. I was like, you know what? I enjoy this. I like
Wow.
kind of getting into the nitty-gritty details of these cases. I like, looking at both sides of the argument and taking this sort of symmetrical approach.
Hey,
And yeah, we'll see if in a few years I end up going to law school, because that's definitely not something I originally thought I'd do, but now that I'm in school, I'm really thinking I might.
very
So
cool. That's
yeah.
wonderful how your path can maybe a door can open just from one class like that. It sounds like a pretty hard class from what you're saying. Was it an upper
Yeah,
division class or
I
was
don't
it a
want to.
little bit like just heavy?
It's
Like what was it?
blacklisted by the students. Like, a lot of students are like, don't take it, it's difficult. And I didn't know that. I
Really
didn't get that information clearly. Um, but it
funny?
ended up being worthwhile. So
That's perfect. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad that you are able to dig into so much. And just because I'm curious, philosophy, tell me about what you like about philosophy. What type of philosophy? What do you enjoy
oh
looking?
my goodness. Yeah. So I took a class this semester called If There Is No God, All Is Permitted, which is more of a question than a statement of fact. And it was this whole semester of delving into the question of, can moral absolutism still exist if we don't have God kind of presiding over us and administering punishment or reward for our moral actions? And we read material that was so beyond me. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm some philosophical expert. I'm not. But we read Kant, Kierkegaard, pretty much anything from, oh my gosh, like early Plato and Aristotle. We dug into like Maimonides, Aquinas, some more religious texts. Um, Professor was fantastic. The people in my class clearly knew what they were talking about. So I learned more from them than the readings most of the time. But
It's funny.
it was definitely pushed me. It was worthwhile. It got me interested in the potential secondary in philosophy. So see if I do that.
Secondary, do you mean another degree?
Yeah. So, Harvard thinks they're so special and they have these terms for majors and minors, where we call like majors concentrations and minors secondaries. It's just semantics.
Gotcha. Okay, I gotcha. Very cool though. Very cool. Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying digging into what you're studying. That's always important and it sounds like it's opening new doors for you and what more could you really ask for? So let's talk now about the IOP, the Institute of Politics, because
Yeah.
this is some fun stuff for you. So you are a part of many organizations there. Tell us about what you're doing. What are your roles?
Sure. Well, off the top of my head, I was in the Women in Leadership Initiative this spring, which introduced me to a lot of my close friends who are also government majors. In the fall, I was a member of the Politics of Race and Ethnicity Forum. That was really neat. And then I wrote for the Harvard Political Review, but ended up dropping that in the spring just because the time commitment, as well as like turning in regular articles, that was just a little bit more of a hefty time commitment that I couldn't necessarily work in. Still a fantastic program, would recommend it to anyone interested in like the intersection between journalism and government. And then also a few other random organizations within there. There's so much you can do. I mean, they have the JFK Junior Forum, which is, they bring in speakers and you can just attend and sit and ask questions. You can get in on these really intimate speaker events. It's actually how I met Senator Tim Scott and got my summer internship.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's really a fantastic hub of just government public policy oriented activities that are accessible to undergraduates.
Oh, so it's not just an undergraduate thing. It's not just a graduate thing. It's a university-wide
Yep. Yeah.
institute. Wow, very neat, very neat. And so do you see a
Mhm.
lot of kids from your major going into that? Is that kind of the spot to be if you are wanting to?
Depends. I mean, I'd say a good portion of the Gov kids are members of at least one IOP program. Then again, they are known to be a little bit more substantial time commitments. So it really depends. I know quite a few government kids who are into consulting, or which I didn't even know what that was before arriving on campus, to be totally honest. Still don't even fully understand it. But yeah, so that there's not one path, but it's definitely a pretty popular one.
Definitely. What would you say you gained the most from it? Obviously, you got your summer internship out of it, but what do you think you are most excited to walk away from, and have gained from this experience over the course of the next 3 years?
Honestly, being able to meet those speakers one-on-one, that's something Harvard boasts is it's not just that you get to kind of hear the best lectures or learn the best material, because that's not true. You can teach yourself everything you're going to learn in college in a public library. But are you going to be able to meet Senator Tim Scott in your public library? Are you going to be able to, meet someone who ran the Peace Corps? Are you going to be able to meet these like politicians who are going to run in a few years for president? Are you going to meet like Chris Christie? Like, you're not. And
Right.
that's the difference, is who you're able to meet and the connections you're able to make.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. I'm excited to see who else you're able to meet over the next couple of
Me too.
Very cool.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, that's how I met Tim Scott. It's an interesting story.
yeah, tell us
I
that
got,
story.
yeah, it came out of rejection, as many interesting stories often do. I was so convinced I had to have this one summer job, and it really was the worst interview of my life for that program. I have no problem saying that. It was genuinely terrible.
What made it terrible? What made it terrible?
Oh, it was a think tank interview. And for anyone who is thinking of applying to a think tank, they're going to ask you rapid fire knowledge questions. So they're asking me, what do you think the role of originalism is in the current constitutional sphere? Can you tell us about what you think the main political divide between Republicans and Democrats is? Can you tell us your thoughts on the recent Supreme Court hearings? And I'm like, already fairly nervous. So
Yeah.
it didn't help that my computer also crashed that morning. So it was an array of just unfortunate
Oh no.
circumstances. But yeah, so I got waitlisted for that program, to no one's surprise. And the next morning I woke up, and I don't take failure lightly. So I applied to, I'm just emailing think tanks. I apply to an OPD office. I call my senator's office and see what they're doing. Midterms were coming up, so I was looking at campaigns, just excessive, really. And then I get a text from my friend, and she's like, hey, Tim Scott's going to be here tomorrow, and I didn't see you on the list. Do you want to come to this event? It's going to be like 10, 15 students, being able to ask him questions. And I was like, yeah, I'll come. That sounds
Heck
awesome.
yeah.
And so before that, I am on the phone with my dad, who is very similar to me. And he's like, well, Abby, why don't you just ask him for a job? And I'm like, Dad, no. And then I get to thinking, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna ask him for a job. So I go up to him, and I'm like, I love your campaign. Obviously, I hold a lot of those values dear to me as well. I also grew up in a single mother household. I used athletics to get where I am today. And my faith is also my guiding principle for my politics. And all of those things are very similar to his story. He has a very interesting life story. And I made my case for why he should give me a job, and I got one. So
No way. Was it on the
yeah,
spot, or was it one of those, hey, let's stay in touch?
no, it was actually in front of, so I waited till the end of the program until all the students filtered out. So it was like 45 minutes after his speaker event had ended. And it was honestly terrifying. I'm not going to act like I walked up there completely confident. I was scared. The entire IOP staff is like to my immediate right. His whole staff is on my left. His intern's typing away in a chair next to me. He's in front of me. And I'm like, okay, well, the worst thing he says is no.
Right.
The worst thing he says is, our office is full, which I knew he was going to say that because it was April.
Mm-hmm.
And the offices are filled by February. So I knew he would say that. It was just a matter of how well I made my case. And so I walk up there, and I said what I said to you in a much more eloquent, thought out manner. And yeah, he was like, well, what about an internship? And I was like, that would be fantastic.
Wow.
And yeah, he said, our offices are technically full, but if you email my guy here, we'll get you in the last session. And then I had to really scramble to find rent in DC, but couldn't have been more grateful. It worked out perfectly. So
you're going to be living there this summer?
Yeah, I'll be in DC starting July. Um, I'm honestly so excited. The DC summer experience is one of those kind of coveted government major
Right,
pathways.
right. No, yeah, definitely.
So I'm thrilled. It couldn't have worked out better, honestly. Huge blessing. I can't take credit for this situation. You know, immediately after I received that rejection from the first job, I called my stepdad. Pretty emotional. He's usually who I call when I'm in those dire situations. And he's like, Abby, when has God not used something like this to work for good in your life? Like, when has he not? He was like, even if it's not immediate, I promise there's a reason for this. And then like 72 hours later, I had the new job.
Wow,
So it's
that is
crazy how that
awesome.
works. You know, I'll
Do you
always
think that if
remember
you could
this.
make a decision off the top of your head, this internship versus the one that you feel like
This
you
one.
100%. Wow, that's
This
awesome.
one, 100%. I mean, I'll be in the Senate. I'm going to be on the Hill. The other internship would have been absolutely fantastic. It was fully covered. They were going to have a faith-based component to policy. It was going to be policy work, but this internship is kind of one of those once in a lifetime type of
Wow,
deals.
that is
And
so cool. What are you going to be
yeah,
doing while you are on the Hill?
oh gosh, pretty typical uneventful intern stuff. Constituent work, probably the Hill tours, which is fun. I'm looking forward to that. But if I had to pick what I'm looking forward to most, it's going to be meeting the people. You know, there's like something like 20,000 interns in DC a summer, and I just want to meet as many people as I can. So
It's going to be so much fun. Oh my goodness, I'm happy for you. That's good. That's
thank
so
you. I
great.
appreciate that.
Definitely. Well, we're going to take a quick little break here and we're going to jump right back into it. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
So we were just talking about your internship with Tim Scott this summer, how exciting it was that you got that, kind of what led up to that, all of the crazy twists and turns, but it all worked out for the best. So that is so exciting. I want to talk now about your time in swim and dive. We've touched on this a lot, but when did you start swimming?
I was probably around 8 years old. I was always the kid that was swimming until the pool closed. And I think my parents were like, great, let's put you in competitive swimming. And even as a young kid, I loved the sport. I mean, even now I still do. That's not true of everyone in swimming. It's an incredibly mentally strenuous, competitive environment. And I loved how it was quiet in a very real sense. I loved that no one could talk to me while I was doing it. And yeah, to this day, I still love it. So.
Wow. Did you always know you wanted to go to college for it?
No, not really. You know, mid sophomore year, I actually almost quit. I was in a really terrible place mentally.
That's high school.
Um, yeah, I mean, it was terrible. I pretty much faked a concussion so that I could have medical clearance to stay home for 8 hours a day alone. And yeah, it was a really, really dark time for me. And I wish I could say like something crazy happened and I just pulled myself out of it. And that's just not at all what occurred, honestly. I got really, really angry, and that somehow I funneled that into motivation. And I wish I could say I found healthy ways to motivate myself, but it wasn't until very recently that I was able to start to let go of that anger and kind of replace it with gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That is, yeah, that's deep. So
Yeah.
why didn't you just quit right then and there?
I I can't really answer that in a really concrete way. I mean, I've always had this intrinsic fighter mentality, and I've never really gone down easy. And I think even in my worst, the worst period of my life so far, without a shadow of a doubt, I couldn't quite give up. And I mean, that kicked in later. I had a really rough time senior year trying to make Olympic trials, and I tried to make that cut on 7 different occasions, and I missed the 200 qualifying time by 0.01 ultimately, and then qualified in the 100 a day later.
Yes.
So yeah, and was that extremely emotionally strenuous? Yes, more than I will ever be able to explain to anyone. But at some point I had to let go of the fact that being angry at myself for not meeting my own insane standards
Hmm.
was not going to be a sustainable form of motivation forever. So,
Right. No, I think that's wonderful. I was guilty of that when I played baseball in high school, as I was like, really? I didn't hit a home run, I hit a double, like, and it's like that's terrible, terrible thinking.
yeah,
Um,
really. And
would you say
it
that
was
the
rough.
biggest
Yeah.
stresses came from within the sport of swimming or outside of the sport of swimming, or maybe a little bit of both?
It was entirely self-initiated, to be honest. My parents have never put pressure on me. I mean, they're the type of parents to be like, why don't you get a B? You're stressing yourself out. I mean, at multiple points in time, my mom was like, dude, like, it is not that serious. It is just a sport. And I think almost all of my big goals, when I told my parents I wanted to go for trials, they were like, we will support you, but at the same time, we see that you're driving yourself into a hole and we don't want it to be one you can't get out of. And it was hard. I mean, going into COVID, I unfortunately I was going to go for my cut a week after COVID hit and everything shut down. And that was probably the worst thing that could have happened for me mentally. And I want to preface that by saying people went through far worse. There are much, much worse tragedies that you can experience than not getting a cut. But in that moment in time, I was so self-absorbed with my own goals that I actually could not see that.
Yeah.
And I'm saddened by that, but it was also the reality I was in. And I trained open water in a lake during the pandemic. I trained in a backyard pool. I was running like 6 miles a day. It was absurd. It was absolutely ridiculous to everyone but me, unfortunately. And I came into virtual school, and I mean, school wasn't that strenuous. I was writing my thesis, but that was about it. And I was just going for this cut continuously and missing it and having to you know, miss my biggest goal in the sport and then have to tell myself, but tomorrow we're coming back and we're going to train harder, since apparently last time what we were doing wasn't enough. And to
Wow.
go through that like 7 times, I mean, it it almost ruined my relationship with the sport.
Um,
And my coaches saw that, because when I finally made the cut, I told them I'm going to take a step away from the sport for the summer of 2021, and they were like, we fully support you. And I hit the ground running when I came to college and had the support system that is my wonderful team. So,
is so great. Wow.
yeah.
Well, a lot of good lessons in there. I mean, you really just laid them out perfectly. So now you have a more healthy relationship with the sport. You're enjoying it. You have your team. They're super supportive. Are you going to continue competing to qualify for the Olympics?
No, unfortunately, I'm not quite at that level. And if I had wanted to be, I wouldn't have gone into the Ivy League, just because it's a different level of competition. I probably would have gone to like a Power 5 school, but
What's a
that's a
Power
little
Five
bit
school?
beyond me. I'm not gonna set any false
What's a
pretenses on
Power Five school?
like Indiana or Wisconsin, just these schools where they just shower resources on athletes and make it
Huh?
so that it's pretty much impossible for them to fail. At Harvard, you're balancing a unique set of challenges.
Right.
You're having to be a D1 athlete, but also a Harvard student. And that's a lot of stressors.
That
So,
is a lot of stressors. Good Lord. Well, I love to hear that story of how you've been able to come out of change the motivation. Really, that's what's important to me because, yeah, you can fuel a lot of your progress through anger and hate. And you said it
mhm.
best, it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable relationship with yourself or the activity that you're doing. What has been the best way for you to get out of that mindset? A hard
Yeah,
thing to snap
well,
out of internally.
yeah, I read once that I think anger is fear's bodyguard is the way it was phrased. And, anger is like the immediate response. So when I was just feeding on that just internal disappointment, it was actually because I was so afraid of failing myself.
Wow.
And when I really confronted that, it was difficult. It was really the end of my freshman fall, is when I was like, this is not working. I need to get out of this. And it reminds me of something I read once that said, like, the distance between your head and your heart is like 11 inches or something like that. And that's the distance that can stop you from reaching your full potential. You know, I guess my head told me I wasn't smart enough to succeed at Harvard when I was going through the recruiting process. My head told me that I wasn't a good enough government major to be in the IOP, and that maybe I shouldn't look into law school. My head told me that running for student gov as an athlete was never going to work. And again, that I just didn't deserve to be at Harvard, that I took a spot from someone smarter than me. And over, I've had to just fight my own self-doubt in these situations. You know, if I had given up after attempt number 1 to make trials, I wouldn't have been able to have that experience. And I probably wouldn't be going for it again. Same with like anything in life. I mean, fear traps you and it convinces you that, you know, your comfort zones, they protect you and ultimately they just trap you, right? And I think overcoming that distance between head and heart, that's the lesson that I would say is going to be the most difficult thing anyone confronts. Everybody deals with adversity. That's not unique. It's just how you confront it.
Right. I love that. That's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, let's talk now about how big of a role you've played in the student government with all of your experiences from your athletics, because Harvard just restructured their student body government. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What was the whole principle behind that?
Yeah, so I was not a member of the past student government, so I can't speak to the details or complexities of that situation. But we used to have the undergraduate council, and it was significantly larger. It was a representative from every house, I believe. It was a representative for classes. I mean, you had like the president, and it functioned like a Congress where if you wanted to get something done, issues were presented and a committee was made, and then the committee would talk about the issue. And by the time they even came up with a solution, they had to propose something to administration. Administration rejects it. You know, it's interesting. It sounds like the same issues our current government deals with, where by the time you want to get anything done, it's been forever and the issue is already passed. So they restructured it this year so that it's more of these groups. For example, you have like a wellness officer, or you have, like me, you have like a sports officer, where you have people who address certain aspects of student life rather than attempting to represent a certain group of people. That way, if a student has an issue, they bring that issue to the most pertinent team. And then from there, like my job would be to create a committee or like a group of people to work on that specific issue. But obviously I would like preside over it. So like, for example, something a lot of the D1 athletes at Harvard have noted is that our athletics center is far from campus, right? And there's no dining on that side of campus. And so there's like a proposal for a fuel station with like just your typical like protein shakes, core power, like very basic foods there. And that's much more doable within this structure because you create a team. And as a varsity athlete, I also have connections to groups like SAC, like the undergraduate women of Harvard Athletics, just these groups that directly serve athletes, but then also the student government component. So it's kind of like this bridge forming that's never really been there.
Wow, that's really neat.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
really neat. What would you say you've been able to accomplish most? Like what obviously the role itself is a brand new role. You're the first person to do this there. But what has been your biggest impact that you're proud of?
So I'll be clear, I just got elected.
Oh, you just got elected. So you really start this whole process next year.
Yeah.
Last year, my bad.
No, you're good. I did just get elected. And I have already started, you know, having my administration meetings, kind of laying out my plan for the fall. But what I'm most proud of is just creating a space for athletes within student government. Because to me, you know, we make such a big deal about representation in this country. And that's not lost on me, because just the fact that there is a varsity athlete on those boards and in those meetings means that those needs are going to be spoken to. And I know that me last fall, with my crippling imposter syndrome and fear of people seeing me as inferior because of my athletics, I know I would have benefited from seeing a student athlete in student government. I would have been like, oh, maybe I should run, instead of having this whole identity crisis where I still ended up running. But
Right.
I think that's what I'm proud of. And, I'm like, for those athletes that are still, dealing with that sense of, do I belong here? That's what I want to change. Is I don't want any athlete to ever shy away from an opportunity at Harvard just because they think they're not qualified as a result of being an athlete.
Wow, that's wonderful. Well, you are going to make such a big impact. You are so
Thank you.
driven, so motivated, and yeah, I'm excited to see what you're able to do. I think this is just wonderful. Everything you've been doing is really great, and it's exciting to learn more about you. So let's go now into our rapid fire round
Oh,
and ask you a few questions. I don't know how I gave you this a little bit before, so whatever comes to your mind, shoot it out. But the first question is favorite book. What is your favorite book?
The Obstacle is the Way, Ryan Holiday.
The Obstacle is the Way. I've heard that, but I have a buddy reading that book. He says it's the best one he's ever read.
Yeah, it's whenever people ask me my favorite book, I get a little annoyed because I read so much that I'm like, that's just such a silly question. Like,
Yeah, there's so many
I
good
read all the
books.
time. But that book, I think, fits well into what we've discussed. It's the thesis is just turning adversity into opportunities. It uses stories, uses anecdotes, so it's really easy to read. It's a short book. I'd recommend it to anyone because it touches on what I said earlier. Everyone deals with adversity. The successful people are the ones that confront it head on.
I love that. Next question. Who is your favorite teacher and what was your favorite grade?
Oh, definitely my AP Lit teacher, Mrs. Wilgenberg. I owe her so much. She's part of the reason I am at Harvard. I mean, I was no phenomenal test taker. I am going to be so honest. Like many before me, and hopefully not that many after me, those tests were not easy for me. And she took the time to help me get the score I needed. And
Was that for
can't
the
thank her enough for
SAT or
that.
the ACT or
I took the ACT because it catered to my strengths in humanities a bit more. But I think both tests are absurd, to be quite honest.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad that she was able to help you so much. What is your favorite thing about Harvard?
The people.
The people.
I love hearing other people's stories, and I touched on this a bit earlier, but it's not so much what you're learning that makes Harvard special, it's who you're learning with.
Right. Definitely. What would you say the most stressful part of being a student day in and day out is?
Time management.
Time management.
You can't do everything. I learned that the hard way. You have to balance your passions with what you can reasonably do in 24 hours.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Who is your favorite person that you've ever liked to study with?
I study alone because I'm like scarily productive when I do. So
Or what
it's
about
not a good
maybe
answer.
study isn't the right word, but like bounce knowledge off of each other with?
Oh, then definitely my dad.
Your dad.
Yeah, my dad or my grandma. We're all very, very similar. And she was the type of person where if I said an opinion, she'd be like, well, why do you actually think that? And she would just dissect
Nitpick
my
it.
thoughts and just lay it bare and like find the weak points. And she was just so analytical and sharp. And my dad's the same way, but a little less intense. And
And that's your
just
dad's
having
mom?
conversations with them, it was great. I loved it.
That's your dad's mom?
Yeah.
So it runs in the family. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go. Let's go. Well, wonderful. What is the most meaningful way for students to help each other? What would you
Having an
say?
open-minded approach. Being able to actually listen to others and make others feel heard, you're going to have more constructive problem solving.
I love that. That's beautiful. What is your biggest hope to accomplish during your time on Earth?
Integrating my faith and then my passion for politics into a life of service in the political sphere. That's how I would say it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, you're definitely going to accomplish that. What is your top piece of advice for those who are early in their educational journey?
Don't let anyone convince you you have to have your path figured out at any point in time. I don't care if you're a graduating senior. I don't care if you're a freshman that just got on campus. You never need to have your path figured out. The opportunities that are probably going to be the most life-changing for you are going to come on a whim. The people you meet that offer you opportunities are probably not going to be who you expect. At any given point in time, everything can change. And the people who you think have it figured out are just the people who are so good at faking it. That would be my advice.
I love that advice. That's wonderful. Well, Abby, you have been an absolute pleasure to have on as a guest here today. Where can people follow the work you're doing and learn more about you and keep up with everything you're up to?
Definitely my LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active on what I'm working on. That's just Abby Carr. I'm on Instagram also as Abby Carr. It's never any special handle. Pretty easy to get a hang of. So, yeah.
Well, give her a follow. Go see what she's up to. Abby, again, this is such a pleasure. You're going to do so much in these next 3 years, and I'm excited for your summer internship and everything else that you have in front of you to overcome and succeed at. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.